Good afternoon, students. Now, in this class, we'll be doing the final topic, that is to use float to style the forms. Now, to style the forms that contain both label and input elements, the most preferred way is to embed them in tables. Use a table tag. The first column we embed the label tags, and in the second column we give the input tags. So this is a hack for pre-CSS arrangement, and this makes my code very complicated and difficult to modify. So it's better to use a CSS layout, especially the float layout, which is so simple in the sense it only tells how the elements are going to be positioned relative to each other, and now how it positions them. So for this, let us take a simple example of this HTML page wherein this is only the HTML part. We have linked the CSS to a separate file. Link relation style type text css href floatform.css. Now floatform.css contains all the styling information. Inside the body tag, you can see we have a form with the field set, and inside the field set we have a label for name, then a text box, then a label address and its text box, then label for phone number and its text box, and finally a button to submit the request. You can see here we have used the button tag for the button, and the not input type is equal to button. That is because I want to my CSS file to be very clean. I do not want to use class and ID attributes, even though that option is available. I could have easily used input type equal to button, but then I would have to use a class attribute with all my input tags to specify different formatting for each. I basically wanted the button to have a different formatting and all the input tags to have the same formatting. That is why I used a button tag to specify the button and not an input type equal to button tag. So what I expect this form is to give me an output like this, but what I get is, depending on the screen size, I might get this name, text box, then address floating here only. It's text box, the line is finished, so maybe phone number on the next line, and it's text box. By default, the elements are placed from left to right and top to bottom, and this would do without the CSS. This will do according to the window size. It might push the elements on the next line or put it on the all on the same line and the button on the next line. But now I want a way by which I can arrange them like this vertically in one line. To do this, basically what we need is to use float, but here you can see that this would have been the output if we are not using any layout. It depends on the window size actually, how many elements show up. These are some of the things about the code. The CSS external, we have already seen that. The HTML code is minimal. There isn't a table, we have not used table. Labels are part of the design. Everything is selectable. That means I have not used ID or class attributes for CSS selectors. You can simply use the name of the tags. And we have used a button tag. I have already told you we have not used input type equal to button on purpose. This is because I want all the input tags to have the same layout or style behavior, and the button tag to have a different layout behavior. Now if you have a page with styles and you do not want to basically see these styles, you want to see it without these styles as in here, then you can use either Chrome Developer Tools or Firebug, and you can disable all or some of your CSS style rules. Now we see how we use float to beautify this form. When I'm designing a form, basically what I want is that all the labels should be towards the left and the text on the label should be right aligned. and we also specify a margin right. The other thing that I want, all the input tags should be toward on the right of the label, but they should also be as far as left possible. The button should be on the next line after all the form elements have finished, and again it should be at a preferably centralized position, or maybe on the left. That is up to you how you design it. So in this form, what we do is we create the float form .css without the clear attribute. This is the css file. We have used specified the background color for the field set. This is for the label. We have floated it towards the left. We have specified the width of the label as 5 em. All the text is aligned to the right using text align attribute, and the margin right is 0.5 em. So anything after the label will leave a space of 0.5 em, and then that thing will follow. Then for the input tag, we have specified the background color. We have floated it to the left. It does not mean entirely to the left of the screen. It means as far left as possible. Then for the button tag, again we have floated it to left. The width is 10 em for the button. The margin left is 7 em. Margin top is 1 em. Background color and color for the button is given. Now बैकग्राउंड कलर एंड कलर में आई होप डिफरेंस सबको क्लियर है. बैकग्राउंड कलर इज बेसिकली the color of the background, and the color is the font color. That is, whatever the text is displayed on the button would be in this color. So with this, css file is basically adding color to each element. It is floating the labels to the left. We saw float :left. Then third thing, it is also specifying the label width to 5 em. It sets the labels to be right aligned. This is because some of the labels would be longer than the others. Say for instance here, the address is having more characters and name and phone number are having less characters, but I want all of them to end at the same space. So that is why we have right aligned them using text align :right, and we also specify the margin right so that there is a gap between the input text box and the label field. Then we also set the inputs float to left. Now this does not mean that the input tags are going to be on the left hand side of the screen. It only means that the input tag element go next to the label if possible, and on the next line if necessary. They're going to go as far left as possible, how much space there is on screen depending on them. The float button too is aligned to the left, but we have given it a top margin and a left margin using the margin left and margin top options. So it is going to be 7 ems from the left and 1 em is the top margin. That is, it would be 1 em down from the other elements. So but still it will not necessarily give me this kind of behavior which I was looking for, that all the labels are aligned on the same line and all the text boxes are aligned, and then we have the submit request button. This would be the behavior when the browser size is very small and skinny. But if I increase the browser size, it might look something like this. The name label is towards the left and right justified. We have the text box floated to as much left as possible. Then we have the address label. It is also floated to as much left as possible. It's not going to remove the other elements here. Float only tells to put it as much left as possible. If it's not possible, it takes it to the next line. Say for instance, address came, the text box came, the phone label also came, but the next text box could not fit on the screen, so it took it to the next line. For the button, obviously we have given a 1 em margin and 7 em width, so it's here in the center. Otherwise, if I had not specified the margin, it would have been as much left as possible. It totally depends on the screen size, how the elements are going to line up. But leaving everything on the float, you would say we have done a mistake, we should have used tables only. But no, we can fix this. I mean, we can fix it by basically specifying that all the labels should begin on the new line. There should be a mechanism to specify it, and in fact there are two ways by which I can tell that the input element should float next to the labels, but each label should begin on the next line. The first of those methods is that we adjust the field set width. So for this, what I do, for the field set tag, I set the width attribute to 15 em. What it will do, it will basically shrink the field set to occupy only 15 em width, and all the elements are going to be arranged in this 15 em only. So obviously, since there is no space here, this address cannot be written here and it has to go on the next line. Now this is a very easy hack, but it has a drawback. This doesn't always work because the user from the browser settings could change the font size and mess up all the calculations for you. So the better option is that we use the clear attribute to control the page layout. Now the one thing about this clear attribute is that it is used only along with the elements that use the float attribute. The clear attribute can be set to left, right, or both. Setting the clear attribute to left means you want nothing to the left of this element. In other words, it means that the element should be on the left margin of its container. That means it must be towards the left of the screen in layman terms. If I set the clear attribute to the right, that means there should be nothing to the right of this element. And if I set it to both, then it means that it should be the only element on this line. There should be nothing on its left and nothing on its right. So to force the button onto its own line, we should use clear attribute set to both. But for labels, we need to set the clear attribute to left so that labels are forced to begin on the next line. You can just remember this little tip. If you want an element to start a new line, set both its float and clear attributes to left. If you want an element to be on a line alone, set float to left and clear to both. So now my code would change. We have the field set. Now with the label, the new thing is that we have used clear colon left. Rest everything is same. Float left, width 5 em, text line right, margin right 0.5 em. The only thing is I have used the clear attribute and there should be nothing on the left of a label. So all the labels would have to basically go on the next line. Next we have the input tag. We have not changed anything here. It's floating to the left. That means it has to go as much left next to the label as possible. For the button, it was already floating to the left. The margins and margin top were already set. But what we used here is clear both. What it does is there is nothing on the left of the button as well as nothing on the right of the button. So I hope the use of float attribute in forms is clear to all of you. Float is generally used alongside clear so that the labels can be moved on to the next line, and we do not rely on the default HTML capabilities that place the elements from left to right and top to bottom depending on how much space there is available on the screen. So this float allows us to basically specify how the form will look. Using float, this would be a very neat and clean form with name, address and phone number, all three aligned very neatly, and the submit request button.